All right. I think we're about ready to get started here. So welcome to the webinar hosted here by Donately and 50 and 50 on how to get ready for Giving Tuesday. Today we're going to be going over some good helpful tips to help you get up and running, ready for this big day. We'll go over some stats, some other things to keep in mind out for, give you some examples, and overall just hopefully set your context for what's coming up. So today, today's webinar will be presented by myself. This is Andrew Barry. I lead all growth at Donately. So most of you are probably familiar with Donately, but if you're not, we're an online donation platform. We help nonprofits and other causes with their technology to help them raise money online. Joining me today is Javin, so I'll kick it over to him to introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. Javin Van Groningen, Creative Director and founder of 50 and 50. We'll get into a little bit of what we do here in the next couple slides, but pleasure to be with you guys. We've done a lot of work with Giving Tuesday and end-of-year campaigns, so it'll be fun to give you guys a little insights into what we know. Andrew and I have worked a long time together, and 50 and 50 was actually really pivotal in the early years of creating Donately, and so we've had a long relationship with the platform, and it's great to see it growing and serving organizations like yourselves. So to just keep going here, just to give you a little background and some information on 50 and 50 in terms of where we're coming from and the advice we're going to give you. For the last 10 years, we've been a digital agency really driven by purpose-driven brands. Now, historically, that's been primarily nonprofits. I would say 80% of the work we've done has been serving nonprofits in their efforts to raise funds for everything from ending child soldiers in Africa to community work and financial stability and education, and it kind of runs the gamut in terms of what we do. But we really pride ourselves in saying that we're an agency not out to save the world, but to tell the stories of those who are. And those are the stories of organizations like yourselves that are putting in the blood, sweat, and tears to change the world. And so we're really proud of the work that we do there. And in terms of some of the work that we've done and the companies that we've worked with, these are kind of the areas I think that really bucket and make sense to the work that we do. So from a strategic perspective, really aligning organizations in the narrative, who they are, what they do, who they're helping. We kind of like to use the analogy of dominoes in the sense that everything that you're doing as a brand kind of leads into another thing, the problem you're solving, how you're stepping into that story, who you're communicating to, what it is that they are required to do to support you. And then we start to move into digital and what does that look like in digital fronts and social media and websites. And then we move all the way into campaigning, which for us is marketing and engagement and really keeping people coming back and engaging in your organization and supporting you in the long term. And we've had the privilege to work with some really, really large and small organizations. So this next slide kind of walks you through some of the people that we've had the honor of working with. And like I said, some in the nonprofit space, others, foundations from larger companies and corporations, and even collaboratives with different groups to really figure out how brands and people come together to create impact. And so just a little bit of a background on us so that you know that when we have advice for today's conversation, that we've done this with a lot of really wonderful organizations, and we're going to give you what we can in terms of what we've learned along the way.
Great. Thanks, Javin. Yeah, so just to run down a quick little list of things we're going to cover today. So start off with some key stats and figures just to kind of give you some grounding on what Giving Tuesday is and really how much it's grown over the past handful of years. And then kind of walk you through kind of the process for getting ready. So starting with telling your story, how to create a really compelling story, how to create content that will drive people to your cause. Talk a little bit about just what you should do beforehand. So auditing your assets. So making sure that everything you have online digitally is consistent and it's concise and it's all kind of marching to the same beat. Spend some time on how to plan your communication. So, whether it's a basic content calendar or just getting everything written out ahead of time, just really way to get that dialed in before the day actually is upon you. And then you know, last couple things, getting your technology dialed in. So being sure that when your donors want to give on this day, everything's ready for them to give, and everything is as smooth as process as possible. And then, you know, the majority of this is going to be focused on getting you guys ready for Giving Tuesday, but we do want to touch a little bit on what to do after the day. So some quick things you can do after the day occurs with all these new data, all these new donors, and all this new data. And then obviously finally leaves time for some Q&A. So on your little Zoom panel there, you should see a way to submit Q&A. So feel free to click on that if you have any questions as we go through it. Submit a question, we'll get pinged here, and then we'll be sure to save plenty of time at the end to answer anything that comes up. So in sort of the spirit of football season here, we're going to get us kicked off with some statistics about Giving Tuesday. So the first thing to highlight here is actually just the amount that's been donated on this single day. So this chart here represents from 2015 all the way through last year. You don't necessarily have to be a math major. I'm not myself to notice that a chart going from left to right and growing to that degree is really significant. So back in 2015, you saw the number of total donations, or sorry, the amount donated to be just over 100 million, all the way to this last year where it actually touched the $400 million mark. So pretty amazing as the growth, and it's just from a single day. So projections for 2019, you know, they'll range, they'll vary, but you know, you see it probably getting to that $500 million mark. So crossing over $500 million, which would just be a tremendous milestone for this day. But it also shows you how willing people are to give, and the more people that find out about it, the more this is going to grow. Along the same lines, just looking at the raw number of actual donations that have come in since 2015, same kind of chart, right? You see it, pretty significant number in 2015, you know, just under 1 million, probably around 750,000, all the way to this last year where it eclipsed that 3 million donation mark. So if you kind of follow that projection right along, you'd be looking at probably 4.5 million donations here. So again, just highlighting this growth that we've seen on this specific day. And you know, if you do the math, you're looking at a donation of just over $100 on average. So some pretty significant gifts come through on this day too. I think people are really becoming motivated to give, and it's, you know, it's kind of a rallying point for that end of the year where it really kind of kicks into the high drive. To highlight on that, so looking at where this traffic comes from, it's been a lot of social media. So social media really drives Giving Tuesday. So in 2018 alone, you saw 14.2 billion impressions for Giving Tuesday. So whether that was the Giving Tuesday hashtag or just, you know, brands brands and causes you follow online, Giving Tuesday really got the word out there in a significant fashion, and there's no reason to believe that'll slow down either. Coupling that with the fact that social media is really important for nonprofits, you know, 55% of those who are involved with a nonprofit online end up engaging with them. So whether that's, you know, donations or volunteers or just sort of spreading the cause, getting people that you know will support you involved on social media is really big. You think of the network that kind of comes with that. So you get to reach their own network, and your word just spreads like wildfire from that point. And then the last key point, Facebook's been huge. You know, $125 million was raised through Facebook alone. So whether that was their own donation tool, or whether, again, it was just sort of the awareness that was hit when Giving Tuesday hits on Facebook, just being able to spread that message, it's a really key driver for this. And yet with all this, 46% of people still don't know what Giving Tuesday is. So if we kind of go back to those charts and see that growth, think of that as just sort of the tip of the iceberg. There's still a really big chunk of people who don't know what Giving Tuesday is. So it just adds to the importance of being sure that the word is out there, and we'll get to it in the next slide, but your story is really concise, and there's really still a potential to see this day really take off. So we're going to get rolling on some of our content here. So I'll kick it over to Javin first to talk about how to tell your own story.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. And for clarification, in the bottom, Andrew, when you go to Q&A, we don't have any open questions. So I'm not sure if it should be entered from Q&A or from the chat icon. So wherever you guys have the capability to type in a question, we can see both of those. So feel free to, wherever you can get words in there, go ahead and ask questions if you guys feel the need to that. So just wanted to make sure that we gave you guys clarity on the ability to do that there. So that said, let's keep going. So in terms of what needs to be done for Giving Tuesday, this idea of content is a big shift, and it's not just a shift for Giving Tuesday. You have the entire industry that we operate in recognizing that really the person who owns the space and owns the eyes and ears of today and tomorrow's donors is the people who are making great content. And those people are making video, making blog posts, making good social content, and it's not just linking out, it's good material that is important for people to engage in, and that's a challenge. So putting time into that is really important. So some of the details that we think are important in doing that, one, not be shy, to really highlight the successes of your organization. If people are considering giving to you, a humble brag of sorts of what you've done, some impacts, some stories around people who have had their lives changed because of the work you're doing is really important for people to see. And to that point, being specific and tangible is important. For us, we see a lot more success in the individual stories more than the numbers. Studies show that big statistics tend to get a little bit beyond us. Our human nature is to bond with an individual and an individual story. So jumping into big numbers oftentimes kind of feels too impersonal and intangible, and so to give examples, specific examples, is really something that resonates in a donor's heart. Urgency is important. You see a lot of giving around things like natural disasters, and that's because it becomes top of mind. You feel important. You feel like your giving is going to do something right in that moment, and so that urgency is important. And there's some ways to kind of create that urgency, and we'll look at those as we look at some of the examples here in a few slides, but you also don't want to go too far with that and kind of artificially generate urgency. I think when you do that, you can come across as inauthentic. And so it's finding that balance of having a need that can easily met with a donation towards this end of year campaigning season, and make sure that people understand the value in that gift. And then there's the typical concept of not everybody can give dollars, and you have the concept of a priming effect, which is when you ask for dollars, there's typically at least a secondary desire to give. So a lot of times people will ask for volunteers first, and people will feel not necessarily guilted, but if they say, oh, I can't volunteer, at least I could give a little money. And you have the same situation when you ask for donations, is you have an opportunity to say, hey, if you can't give, consider these alternative methods, and whether that's in-kind gifts or even just an email sign-up so that you can communicate with them later. Recognize that there's a few ways that people can join your cause without just giving dollars. And then this last one I think is a really important one, because I think a lot of organizations that are smaller, that are not necessarily spending a lot on marketing, Giving Tuesday is a one-day event, but it's not a one-day event. So Giving Tuesday is really the beginning of the most important time of the year for fundraising. And so for a lot of organizations that we work with, Giving Tuesday kicks off a line of communications. And you'll see when we give you guys examples that the examples are Giving Tuesday, leading into holiday, leading into end of year and tax deductions. And I think if you're going to put the effort in, put some effort into the creativity and really allow Giving Tuesday to be the beginning of the rest of the year, where really a lot of organizations are fighting for those donor dollars. The next thing that we wanted to touch on is this idea of consistency. So if people are hearing from you in this time, in this season, and you're going to do something unique, you want to be consistent with what that is. And I would argue our common philosophy is no more than, it's ideal that you have one clear ask with one or two follow-ups if they can't deliver on that primary call to action. A lot of organizations push on us to say, hey, we have volunteer opportunities over here, then we want to have a donation ask, and we're trying to fund this thing, and it gets muddy really, really quick. So I would encourage you to keep it simple, keep it consistent, and really dedicate yourself to a call to action, even if it's a specific project, program, story, at least for Giving Tuesday, something that people could sink their teeth into and recognize that there's a specific thing that you're trying to do. In terms of the creative, I think that's another place where you can kind of bend your brand rules a little bit and create something maybe I shouldn't say bend the brand rules, but use your brand to create something unique that has seasonality to it. So something unique to this end of year, Giving Tuesday, holiday season, and something that has a theme, has a feel that's repetitive, so you're seeing the same things in email and social, and something that's a little out there. I think recognizing how popular Giving Tuesday is, there are a lot of people speaking at this point in time, and so making something that is a little more edgy, a little more unique is going to be valuable in really drawing people's attention. And that consistent stream of content, really what I want a lot of people to think about that often gets overlooked is this acronym of WIFM. It's what's in it for me, and to try to stand in the shoes of a donor in this scenario. So why should they give to you? Their inbox is inundated this end of year time period. They've got a lot of options, and the social impact industry has scaled a lot, and they're getting hit up by a lot of people. So what's in it for them? Is there a dollar match? Is there an opportunity to attend an event? Is there a plaque being made? Get creative, but in the end, even though they're donating, don't forget that there is something that they would like in return, and it's a really big motivator for that final decision of who an organization, who a donor gives to in terms of an organization. So here are just a couple examples. I pulled two sample United Way campaigns that came out and just gave a couple visuals to that, and I'll kind of talk through these. So the first two visuals you're seeing were emails. I only grabbed a couple of them, but they were a 5-email series for this year. And each one kind of had a different theme. So again, like I said, Giving Tuesday is the first of that, and so the first email you're seeing on that left side was paired with the social graphics you see on the far right on different platforms. Most of the language was brought into the content inside of the posts. We typically don't bring too much into images and social, but that was where that campaign started. And then emails 2, 3, 4, and 5 were thank you emails. Thank you to everybody who gave on Giving Tuesday. Here's all the great work we're going to be able to do with those gifts. Followed by, hey, this holiday season, consider supporting somebody, make their holiday, make their year end. You've got so many topics that come as like a rapid fire at the end of year. And so we just continue to hit on each one of those, then a year end, then a tax deduction. So that was kind of one. And when we talk about consistency, when we talk about making it all look and feel similar, this was just kind of one campaign that kind of showed both uniqueness because each platform is different, but at the same time, a kind of common thread, a common style that went from one platform to the next. The second campaign was a pretty decent sized year-end campaign that did a lot of the same concept of kicking it off on Giving Tuesday and then moving through the rest of the year. This campaign did a great job of being unique with the creative. It was definitely different from the color palettes and the things that United Way typically did, but I think that created a lot of success and a lot of interest in the current donors, the current volunteers, as well as traffic on social media because it was something different. And when we talked about being clear about the tangible effects, that was exactly what this campaign did, is it highlighted what happened that year that they were proud of. So the events that took place, how many kids were given college and career readiness initiatives, how many people were given financial support, financial coaching, and we decided to kind of do a photography treatment that was consistent across the board and built even a microsite that kind of housed that experience because, again, we're really trying to move quickly. We don't want to lose people in different parts of your site. You want to
May have quickly lost Javin there, but I'll finish his thought there. Yeah, you want to move people through.
And again, I think within a month, there's a lot to do, but just wanted to show you guys a couple of visuals of how we've done it in the past.
Yeah, and one thing, to add to this is these are obviously beautiful examples and great examples of kind of what we're touching on, but there's really no shame in using other brands or nonprofits or causes or anything like that you really admire and think that do a great job. me as a marketer, and I'm Javin as a designer. I know we in air quotes steal, but we borrow ideas and we take inspiration from all different sources all the time. So if there's some, whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's just a brand or a store that you really like, there's a lot of value in kind of examining what they do and kind of taking some ideas from them and maybe molding it a little bit into something a little closer to what matches what you guys want to be doing. So the next piece of this is along the same lines of consistency. It's really important to take some time and audit. So just take a look at all of your digital channels and digital assets that are out there. So thinking, not only just your website, but also your Facebook page, your Twitter page, your LinkedIn, if you have a YouTube channel, just everywhere where your name or your nonprofit or your cause's name is attached to something, just take a look at those, really dial in it. Is the messaging across those consistent with what you want to tell on Giving Tuesday or at the end of the year? Just be sure that everything is kind of, again, marching to that same beat. Everything is on the same page. If you put yourself in the donor's shoes and you go to maybe your Facebook page and then you follow that through to your website and they're kind of saying two different things and kind of promoting two different ways to get involved, it's a little bit confusing and you sort of get disoriented as a donor. So on this day, or as a donor or a supporter, so on this day, it's definitely the most important to be sure that there's a really consistent flow to what all the different touches that people are going to be interacting with your brand. Specifically, you want to make sure that if you've changed your logo in the last year, or if you've updated your email address, or you've updated your just URL for your website, just make sure all of the links and all of the images, they're all pointing to the right place. All of these are small things when you look at them individually, but they're big things when you think of the kind of entire scope of a journey that someone takes from discovering you to giving to volunteering to becoming a more avid supporter. So creating that nice smooth path and that really consistent journey is vital. And then lastly, and I think we'll touch on this a little bit more when we talk about the tech piece, but don't forget to make sure you look good on mobile devices. The sort of the smartphone and tablet and every sort of different size screen, that's never going to get less important. So just being sure that everything you're doing, whether again it's emails or your website or any sort of images you're hosting, all that looks good on mobile. That's something to be doing, not only for Giving Tuesday, but also just throughout the year. It's a vital piece of any digital strategy these days. So the next piece is, talking about having a plan. So going into this, we've given you a lot of advice and sort of some context around what it means to be prepared and sort of what it means to get ready, but actually having the plan and being prepared for this. Throw it over to Javin for this piece.
Right. So when we talk about getting the word out early, I think what I've spoken about is this idea that Giving Tuesday is the beginning of the season of a lot of giving requests and a lot of communication, but even to step ahead of that and just getting the word out there that something exciting is happening. And you can tease that language and tease that content as you walk towards Giving Tuesday. And you're probably already seeing those. You're seeing some of those, hey, look out for us. Hey, something special is coming your way. Mark your days, countdown, things like that. Those are all just an attempt to be top of mind and get a little bit of excitement. Think of a documentary coming out. You have those pre-rolls, those teasers, those trailers that are all getting the excitement up. And so getting the word out early is really important. Drafting all the material beforehand. Everything takes time. Every social post, every email. And if you don't do it ahead of time, you end up scrambling and you start to lose some of the quality of keeping it all tight and clean and consistent. And so getting that prepped early is important. Feedback is a really big part of this. I think so often we talk to people in our strategic phases and we say, okay, great. Like, how do you know this? How do you know what your goal is? How do you know that this is what resonates? And oftentimes people aren't having candid conversations with donors, typically they're having conversations with board members or internal employees, but oftentimes those people have lost a little bit of a connection to who's actually giving and who's actually supporting you. So we always encourage people to create a little core of people, even if it's 10 to 15 people and you're just emailing them ideas beforehand. Get outside of your walls and make sure what you're saying and what you're thinking resonates. Oftentimes we get stuck in our own internal nomenclature and we say things that are they don't resonate. There are buzzwords, there are terminology that explain what we do. And you get authentic feedback from people who say, yeah, no, I don't really get that. Like, I just, how exactly are you helping? How exactly is this going to change somebody's life? And so getting that feedback is really crucial to make sure that, you've only got a few shots here. You're sending 5 emails amongst the many, 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 many emails that are going to be coming. And so you want to make sure that you get that right. And then the last one's almost just both a reminder of what you're asking people to go through, as well as a testing and ensuring that the people who come, that they can actually go through this process from just a QA, a quality assurance perspective. So go through that donation flow, close your eyes for 10 seconds and think of being a donor who's coming to support you. And oftentimes you'll find things, fields you're asking for, forms start to feel daunting, or if you're on a mobile device, things aren't clicking through correctly. And so it's an opportunity to just walk start to finish through the process and take note of what you feel like might be areas where you can make improvements, because every time you do that, each iteration is going to make things better and better. And when you talk about improvements on a donation flow, if you're sending out thousands of emails, even an improvement of 5 or 6% of a conversion rate, you're starting to look at real cash, real dollar changes when that's taking place.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add that I think I can relate a little bit to sort of even what we do at Donately, but when you go out and you ask for feedback, or you kind of go through this donation flow and kind of putting yourself, be sure to be open-minded. Be sure that you're open to any suggestions that you get in. It may not be exactly what you expect to hear or kind of expect to see, but really go into it with a mind that there might be things you need to change, or there might be really good suggestions that come from places where you don't necessarily expect it to begin with. So like Javin was mentioning, just getting actual feedback from people who interact with your brand, not every day, but on occasion, that's really valuable, because it gives you a lens of taking yourself out of the day-to-day. It gives you a lens of exactly what people are seeing, and likely that if you hear it from 1 or 2 people, it's likely that projects to many other people who are kind of experiencing the same things, be it positive or negative. So just always be sure to keep an open mind when you go back into those type of things and you're going through the process. And writing down what you're feeling at the moment and kind of what you're seeing at the moment is really important, because you kind of only get that chance at a first impression, especially when you're doing like your own flow. You kind of only get that chance once, where you have these really organic, unsort of bridge thoughts. Just get them out in the moment, just so you have them down, and then bounce those off other people too. Kind of the next big piece we want to talk about is if your technology ready. So hopefully not too many of your donors are still using the flip phone there, but of course it's evolved quite a bit from there. So kind of a word in the industry, your tech stack. But thinking of your tech stack, thinking of kind of what we talked about before. Where are all the places that everyone is interacting? And then when they get to that final point, which is typically to give or to sign up to volunteer, just be sure that form, whether again donation form or volunteer form, be sure it's asking the right information. So you don't want to go and overload people asking them for a bunch of personal information, such as address or phone number, if you never plan to really contact them via mail or phone. If you can do all your communications through email, taking those extra fields off a donation form is going to really improve your conversion to this. And like Javin was mentioning, if you can improve some sort of conversion, or if you can improve a process by a few percentage points, going back to seeing how much growth and how much physical dollars are being processed on this day, and then even through the end of the year, every increase of a percentage point is going to translate into actual impact to your bottom line at the end. That's the biggest thing that I see when I go out and help people on Donately, is that their donation form maybe is asking too much information, and you have to have an answer for why you need certain pieces of information. And it's really one of the quickest ways to really boost that conversion and find that translate into donations. Secondly, what's the post-donation process look like? So after someone gives, of course, you hope they're getting some sort of receipt or some sort of acknowledgement that their donation went through. But what are you guys doing with that data otherwise? So hopefully with Giving Tuesday and sort of the end of the year, you're getting a lot of donations from plenty of sources, and maybe a lot of new donations, maybe a lot of recurring donations. So having a thought process of kind of how you segment those people out once they give. So Do you want to be communicating with recurring donors the same way as new donors? Probably not. You want to be sure that the asks are a little bit different. Same goes for big donors versus small donors. Both are important, but the way you should be communicating and speaking to them, it all really starts at that first piece post-donation. So being sure that you have those channels kind of figured out and that you have a really good plan for where you're going to bucket all these people is vital. And this goes into being prepared beforehand, right? This is something you're going to have to do beforehand, and then after all that data is in, you'll have a really good defined place. And then physically, where will that data go? So if you have, you know, a system like Donately or something like that can house all of that data, just being sure that it's clear and you guys have a way to get at it, whether it's an export or whether it's being sent via an integration to, you know, a CRM, that's a whole conversation in and of itself. But this is a good time to start thinking about that. And if you've been waiting to kind of hold off on you know, developing that new CRM or that new database, this is a good time to start, because there's plenty of time between now and the end of the year where you can test it out to be sure. And then there's plenty of data that will come in through the end of the year to make that really valuable, to make that switch valuable, to make your tech really, really smart in that process. And then really, probably one of the more important slides we're going to share today is just being ready for mobile. We've touched on it a few times here, but here are some numbers to just kind of put it into context. So 17% of online donation views on Giving Tuesday in 2018 were from a mobile device. So that's a lot of, that's, you know, 1 out of every 5 folks are looking at your brand, whether it's your donation form, whether it's your website, whether it's your Facebook page, they're looking at it from their phone. So going back to auditing for consistency and being sure that your stories is good and being sure that everything is kind of marching along the same lines, think of it from the point of a mobile device. I know internally at Donately, and I know 50 and 50 the same way, when we design new features or we design new things to look at, it's almost from what does it look like on a phone first, and then we'll sort of build it out to a desktop view. And I think that same kind of mindset should be taken here with anything you're developing. What does it look like on a phone? And I'm sure it'll look good on a larger screen when you kind of scale that up. And then the second, and maybe the more important piece here, is that average gift for a mobile device is bigger than your average gift across all channels. So I think previously in the past, people have maybe thought that donors or even, you know, buyers, anyone is sort of more allergic to big purchases on their phone, and kind of they want everything when it comes to financials to be done on a computer. But I think that trend is completely swapped now. So you hear ads for people buying cars on their phone, buying huge big ticket items just from the palm of their hand, and that there's no different for donations, right? People are plenty willing to give to your organization. I don't think there's a cap on, you know, the amount that they're comfortable giving through a phone versus mobile device. So really keeping that context in mind, that it's not just, you know, $5 and $10 donations that come through mobile, but really it's larger than average donations are coming through mobile now. And again, that's not a trend that I would consider being changing anytime soon, especially as you think of, to get really technical, especially as you think of the mobile speeds and some of the new networks that are being rolled out, where your phone is going to a lot of times be faster than any Wi-Fi. You have to be prepared that people are going to want to give on their phone, and that's going to be the fastest way for them to get there. So combining making sure that everything looks good on mobile and it adapts really well to someone's phone, along with that, that gift from a mobile phone is not necessarily going to be smaller. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to be quite a bit larger. So kind of the last piece here, when the dust settles on this day, and even if the dust settles in early January, I think Javin's going to give you a handful of things to be sure we're thinking about on that post-donation time, or sorry, that post-Giving Tuesday time.
Yeah, and we touched a little bit on that. I think really important once that day is over to acknowledge the donors with communication. So that's a great opportunity, as is, you know, the end of year in general, just sending thank yous and appreciations. It goes back to that what's in it for me piece, that feeling of support, the feeling that people have empowered your organization and supported you is music to their ears. It's really something that, you know, if you can think back, and it's challenging for a lot of organizations, the last time you got one of those thank yous that felt authentic and real and really touched down to the ground the impact that was being made, those feel great. And it's a great way to really increase donor retention and keep people at the table. The progress being made is important as well. And sometimes that's not just a big landfall of donations. Sometimes it's small progress, but that progress is real. And to keep people up to date with what's happening, every touch point that you have where they're feeling like you're moving forward is going to be something valuable for them to hear. grounding your story. I think, another area where we see so many organizations missing the mark is in really illustrating a problem that's being solved. It's so easy for us to step past that and say, hey, we provide meals, we provide homes for children and for orphans and, communities where they're, whether it's, an HIV issue or a poverty issue. And we fail to kind of continue to bring that to the forefront and to explain what the work we're doing is actually creating and the change that's being made. And so grounding your story is, hey, this is a piece of a larger story. Continue to help people recognize there are big problems and that you're making moves and changes in that space. And then this is a good opportunity to ask for recurring gifts. So typically, when you're first reaching out to individuals, oftentimes the donation ask is too early. And then once you do pull somebody in as a donor, oftentimes that's a first-time gift. And if you look at the gifts on Giving Tuesday, I would argue that the one-time gifts are higher on Giving Tuesday than a lot of other asks. And so this is our opportunity to now move that relationship forward with people, to say, hey, thank you so much for that support. We're doing great work with that. Let's keep that up. Let's see if you'll continue to do that throughout the year with recurring gifts. And it's something that you can set up to do weekly, monthly, yearly. Build a program around it where exactly your recurring gifts go. It's another great place to be really tangible. Put a campaign around your recurring giving, whether that's, the September campaign that Charity Water does. A lot of organizations are finding a way to be really supportive of their recurring donors because they're so pivotal to the success of the organization.
Yeah, and I think one last thing is just remember the time of the year and kind of the mindset. It's right after Thanksgiving, so people are feeling really grateful. They've been with their family. There's a lot of really good kind of feelings that's going around. So you being able to share something else that's really good is just going to give people that momentum to go into the end of the year, and it gives something to look forward to, especially if it's some help that they've made you guys progress in solving for your cause, or really whether it's something tangible as building a building, or whether it's just we're that much closer to kind of solving what we set out to do. This is a really good time of year for those type of things. It's hectic for a lot of people, right? They're running around, maybe they're traveling, things like that. So kind of feel-good stories are always something that's going to stand out, whether you're sitting at the airport waiting to get out for family, or whether you're sitting around the table talking about what you're grateful for that year, or what things you're looking forward to. Having really good, we talked a lot about content, but having these really good kind of feel-good pieces that you can share with people who support you, I think that you'll be surprised at how far that message travels and how many people would be willing to share that with other folks who maybe just need that little pick-me-up, or just kind of want to be proud of what they've accomplished along with you. So, treat them as partners, treat them as equals in this, and then really be sure to be transparent with what you're doing, because I think this is exactly the time of year we're leading into where people want to hear that type of stuff. Javin, do you have anything else to add before we kind of move over to questions?
No. I mean, I don't expect too many questions, but no, I think we covered what we wanted to.
Cool. Yeah, I think so. If you have any questions, feel free to put those through. But I think we'll end. I have a few ones that I know have come up over and over again as I've worked. So I'll sort of pick Javin's brain really quickly because I think it's really valuable. So Javin, I think one thing we always hear is that it feels like a lot to do. So I think we tried to boil it down. But if someone asked you kind of what are the one or two most important things that they can do, what would your answer be at this time of year specifically?
Yeah. So it's probably different depending on who you are. I think that, and really a big kind of precursor to my answer is going to be what size of an audience you currently have. Because I think for organizations that have a decent email list, a decent social following, I think that answer is pretty straightforward, which is, open up a spreadsheet, come up with, 3 to 5 emails, a rhythm on your social channels. If you're doing mailers, those are pretty immediate in terms of getting those out for this year. But, and come up with your theme, come up with your concept, come up with what that media is going to be, and really just craft it. I think a lot of people get stuck with, oh, this has to be this big, huge thing. Spinning up a page, pretty straightforward on a lot of websites. Try to get one together that's really simple so that all of those places have one kind of hub to drive traffic to. Be short, be concise, be very just clean and easy, and get people straight to that donation form. I think, Donately isn't the only giving platform that we work with, but it is one of the best in terms of making it really easy to put that form anywhere it needs to go. So I would encourage people to just get a really simple, clear message up on a landing page and put together that spreadsheet of what you're going to say and a good rhythm on your social and email, and get that out there. If you don't have those, it gets a little bit trickier because, the analogy we use sometimes is you're going to be yelling into an empty room, or you're going to be, yelling into the stock market. It's going to be a lot of people out there, making a lot of noise, and that creates a little bit of a harder time for you to actually build an audience. But I think that there's still strategies to take there too. I think that you can do a little bit of an audit of how people are getting their message out there around you, and kind of go places where they're less populated. Go to quieter rooms, whether it's Pinterest or it's different page strategies, different SEO that you can rank for, and put a little money behind some paid ads. That may feel overwhelming to a lot of you, but you can run pretty small ad budgets on things like Facebook, and you can boost some of your posts. So maybe that's a good place to start, is if you don't have a huge following, get 3 or 4 posts out there on Instagram and Facebook and see what's generating some interest, and boost them. Put a little bit of money behind those just so it gets in front of a few more eyeballs, and this is going to be a good opportunity to kind of test the water. And I would also say that if this is your first time kind of getting into this, don't feel like the dollars raised is the only thing you're going to learn. One, you're learning the programs, you're learning how to boost a post, you're learning how to pay to play, you're learning how to run a campaign. And yeah, you may not raise, as much as you hope on this first time around, but you're going to learn things, and each step forward is going to be valuable. So I would say just do it. Get something out there, see how it goes, and it at least gives you some fodder for what you're going to do in the years to come, and something good is going to come of it. Some learning, if not some extra dollars for the beginning of this season.
Definitely. One thing I would add is also don't be afraid to use your network for any sort of advice. So we talked a little bit about getting feedback, but the more people you kind of talk to, the more ideas that are going to come out, and some are going to be simpler than others. Some are going to be really kind of no-brainers, if you will. So being sure that if nothing else, you're talking to different people, whether it's, again, after new donations come in, just send your donors a note and just say, hey, thanks for giving. What, if you don't know them personally, maybe like just a quick ask, like, hey, what motivated you to give? How can we be more, how can we get to you again? That sort of thing. So just not being afraid to ask for that feedback, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think, Andrew, to your point, that when you have a network, I think almost every organization has a handful of people that, the industry term is influencers. Really, you're looking for people that support you, that have decent followings on social and decent activity in their social networks. You don't have to think of celebrities. They're actually not the biggest influencers anymore. You see a lot of people that have just created really big followings online, even though they're not necessarily a big celebrity or somebody that a lot of people know. They're just really well known in digital spheres. And for those people to say, hey, this Giving Tuesday, I supported this organization, crafting a little message for them, or even a graphic and saying, hey, if you sent this out, this would be really helpful for us, that catapults your message in front of thousands of people. So I would encourage you to look around, talk to your employees, see if anybody knows somebody that has kind of an influential base, and just make that ask to them to kind of put your message in front of their audience. It doesn't work for most brands, but for nonprofits, you see them getting that type of attention, and oftentimes getting that for free because people are willing to do that in front of their network. So it's not a shoo-in. That might not be something that you have, but it's a great place to try out because influencers are growing in terms of their ability to raise funds.
It's a great point, and it just speaks to how vital social media has become, not only just for this day, but just in general. All right, so I think that's it from our side. If you guys come up with any other questions, you can always reach out. I'll be emailing everyone out a recording of this, so you'll be able to kind of go back and see it as you guys really start to dig into the plan. Really hope this was useful. It was a lot of fun, I know, for Javin and I to plan this, but I really hope you found some value in this and you could take something away, and that this year becomes kind of that catapult into the end of the year and you see some really good success.
Yeah, appreciate it. And Andrew, as you circulate this, just circulate our email addresses. If anybody wants to reach out for any work or any other questions, feel free to do so.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thank you all for your time. And like I said, be looking out for an email soon with the recording.